and one of the unspoken rules was that you didn't talk about the Federal Reserve. And I'm not sure that most of the people that I talked to had any idea what the Federal Reserve was, which made them pretty ignorant economists. So let's go do the math. The Federal Reserve, when we say get in debt, that means we're borrowing money from somebody. The U.S. government is borrowing trillions of dollars from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve that controls America wants it this way. They want it this way because they can charge enormous interest rates on the debt we borrow. And guess who pays the staggering interest rates on all the money that is borrowed? Well, we, the taxpayer, we, the people. It's on our backs, and now it appears that it's going to be on the backs of our children. So it's financially very advantageous for the Federal Reserve to lend us money because they're making a fortune. Number two is, this comes from Keynesian economics, and John Maynard Keynes was an economist with the Fabian Socialists, along with H.G. Wells, the science fiction writer and former head of British intelligence, Bertrand Russell, the intellectual and mathematician, and a number of other gentlemen. And they were the intellectual force that planned out the coming world government, the new world order, and so on and so forth. And they mapped out an agenda where all individual sovereign nations would be dismantled and the world would move into a one world government and a one world currency. Now, very powerful men, this is not something hidden, it's not something secretive, have come out in the open, especially in the European press, and they have said that the game plan is that they're going to reduce the standard of living of the American middle class and the European middle class, and they're going to transfer trillions of dollars of wealth from the middle class worldwide, send it to third world nations. And the purpose of this is to lower the standard of living intentionally of the middle class and raise up artificially the third world nations. Now, the third world nations will not see their standard of living raised, because that money is going to go to dictatorships, and their lifestyles are not going to be improved. So, what's the purpose of this? Well, these leading financiers, I could name their names, you would know them. They said, we want to weaken the dollar because we don't want the dollar to be the world's currency. We're going to weaken the British currency. We're going to weaken the European currency. And what we're going to do is, as we lower the standard of living of the U.S. middle class, we're going to set the stage for a world currency. And that's what the IMF is about, and the World Bank, and the G20, and all the rest of that stuff. And once they put this world currency in place, the world will not be relying on the dollar, and America's economy will sink even further, because again, we're witnessing the planned destruction of our nation, and both the Republicans and the Democrats are in on it. And the game plan is, after you have world currency, to have one world government. But it's not going to be a government based on, let's say, the Constitution of the United States or Judeo-Christian principles. It's going to be a government based on humanism, and it will be ultimately setting the stage for what John predicted in Bible prophecy, which is a coming one world government ruled by the Antichrist, and a coming one world economic system ruled by the second beast, who is the false prophet, who distributes the microchip implant. I'm Paul McGuire. You can get the resource materials on paulmcguire.org. Help us spread the message, by the way. And we're going to continue on analyzing current events from a biblical perspective. Hi, I'm Paul McGuire, and we are analyzing economic socio-political events from a biblical perspective. Now, here's the game plan. The game plan is to destroy America. The people that run America, the Council on Foreign Relations, their goal is global government. I was reading a report. They claim to be a think tank. I was standing outside of their offices about a year ago shooting a documentary, and the former Secretary of the Treasury, Robert Rubin, was standing next to me listening into my monologue into the camera. And I basically said that the real capital of the United States of America is not in Washington, D.C. It's right behind me, and I was pointing to the Council on Foreign Relations building where I was standing in front of. The CFR has about 500 to 700 people in the top positions in government. They've had that number of people for quite a few administrations. So they basically control the domestic policy and the foreign policy of the United States of America. Their goal is global government. Now, Rockefeller is a driving force in all this, but he's not the only one. You have the Bilderberg Group, you have the Bohemian Grove, you have the Illuminati, which is a real organization. Now let's stop there for a moment and talk about the Illuminati. Christians especially don't seem to understand that there is a supernatural component or an occult component to history. In other words, many of the things that we see in economics and politics are a direct result of what's going on in the spiritual realm. They're not happening by random chance. They're happening because of a warfare in the invisible realm, of which God has given his people from the very beginning a key position to play. If you read the story of God's announcement to Abraham to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, you need to recall the dialogue that God had with Abraham, where they went back and forth supposedly negotiating about would God destroy Sodom and Gomorrah if there were 50 righteous and so on. So Abraham was an intercessor. He was an intercessory prayer warrior. And his prophetic station and his relationship with God affected what was going to happen to Sodom. He wasn't a passive participator. He wasn't a retreatist. Because his relationship with God was so powerful and so intimate, God reserved his judgment. Not that God was surrendering his sovereignty, but God has created man and woman, going back to the garden, to be rulers of this earth. And in Revelation, we become the rulers of this earth as well as the servants and the priests of this earth. So mankind has a very powerful position. The problem is the church doesn't read the Word of God, is blinded to the power and responsibility that God has given them. And so in our time too, there's a relationship with what's happening in the world, economically and politically and so on, loss of freedoms, and the spiritual condition of the church. Now the Illuminati has been around for thousands of years, and it goes back to the black Venetian nobility, and I'm not making a racial statement because the word black has nothing to do with skin color in this particular case. The Illuminati passed on occult teachings from ancient Babylon, and they provided the foundation for what was called the French Revolution, the Communist Revolution, and so on. And I have documentation to prove that in my new DVD series, Are You Ready for the Coming One World Government, One World Economic System, and One World Religion. And my other DVD series, American Dictatorship, The Coming Event That Will Change Everything, along with my books. Now, here's what's going on. We see America on the verge of economic collapse. We see Europe on the verge of an economic collapse. We are losing our freedoms day by day. This is all planned. It's all intentional. In Britain right now, if you criticize the government, you are a terrorist. So if you say, I don't like this particular person in political office, or I disagree with that policy, you're labeled a terrorist. I mean, think of the totalitarian implications and the Orwellian implications of living in Great Britain, that if you make a remark or hold a belief that you don't agree with the government, that you're automatically a terrorist. That's a dictatorship. And that's coming to the U.S. very quickly as well. Because remember, there's an invisible elite, a shadow government, driving the independent sovereign nations. They first want to destroy them, which the Illuminati manifesto calls for, and then they want to destroy their economies to have a one-world economy, and then they want to bring in a one-world government, but it'll be a one-world dictatorship, and that's the game plan. Why? Because this scientific elite, and that's how they refer to themselves, is they see themselves as royalty, as godlike, and they actually refer to you and I, the middle class, as, quote, useless eaters, subhumans. And when you look on the back of a dollar bill, you see that famous picture of an occult pyramid, and the base of the pyramid represents the masses, the slaves on the plantation of the New World Order. Then higher up, on top of the base of the pyramid, you see the all-seeing eye of Lucifer, the Illuminati, the illumined ones, and then at the very top of the pyramid, you see the elite, the scientific elite, which rules this hierarchy of slaves, and they are the godlike elite that controls the world. Well, they take that very seriously. And on the same dollar bill, there is the words written in Latin, Novus Order Seclorum, New Order of the Ages, which basically means New World Order. That's their game plan, and it's been their game plan for several hundred years. Hitler wrote a book on the New World Order. H.G. Wells wrote a book on the New World Order, and many others. So, there's a spiritual nature here. Now, I want to quickly go back to Nazi Germany. I know I've done this a number of times, but the parallels regarding what's happening in Nazi Germany and what's happening in the United States and Europe are terrifying in their implications right now. Parallel tracks. The Weimar Republic was moving into hyperinflation. The economy was about ready to crash. Both in the United States and Europe, the printing of money from nothing by organizations like the Federal Reserve causes inflation. At a certain point, inflation will move to hyperinflation. I believe that the spiritual condition of the church is the exact same spiritual condition of the church in Nazi Germany. You have to ask yourself the question, why did the evangelical church in Nazi Germany not discern the massive invasion of demons and occult powers that were invading their nation through the Nazi Party, which was an occult party first, stemming from the Thule Society, which was an occult party. The key leaders that Hitler surrounded himself with were all deep practitioners of the occult and Satanists. Hitler himself participated in the darkest of satanic rituals and was demon-possessed. But the church, because they stopped believing the Word of God and they stopped teaching the Word of God, very similar to the U.S. and Europe,